Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Australia, or g'day, mate, as we say in Australia. So to start out class today, I want to hand out a couple of things for you to look at. First of all, here's some Australian money. You can take a look at who you see on the money and what it looks like and the size and shape of the different coins. Obviously, who can tell me what are these? Yes, these are boomerangs. And if you want to come by after school and go ahead and test these out, you can. I bought them on purpose so that you could play with them a little bit. Now, if you've never thrown a boomerang, there's a little bit of a key to it, actually. The first thing that you want to do is you want to grab it on the bottom third of the boomerang, and you want to throw it at, okay, so imagine your top of your head is 12 o'clock, okay? If I'm right-handed, I want to throw it at about 3 o'clock. Well, not even 3 o'clock, maybe about 1.5 or 2. You want to throw it at an angle, and you want to throw it with a flick of a wrist, and you want to throw it into the wind. It's kind of like an airplane. You have to have lift in order for the wings to fly, right? So the same thing with a boomerang. You want to throw it into the wind so that it catches it. And the story goes that supposedly if you do that, it's going to spin and it's going to come at least somewhat close to back to you. Anyway, I mean, we'll have to test it a little bit and try it out. But that's actually how you throw a boomerang. So if you want to try that, you sure can. Anybody tell me what's this? Yep, it's a rain stick, one of the musical instruments of Australia. And it's used all over the world in different shapes and sizes. Okay. This thing right here, it looks like a surfboard about, 10 inches long, if you're at home. This is called a bull roarer. And attached to the end of this bull roarer is a long, about 2 feet long string. And the reason it's called a bull roarer, and by the way, I know that we use boomerangs for fun, of course, but it actually was used as a weapon or for hunting. A really easy way to try to capture a rabbit, for example, was to actually use a boomerang and try to catch it around the neck or hit it so that it would be stunned, and then you could go and kill your prey. So you had food. Forgot to mention that. So a bull roarer was used in battle, actually. And the reason it's called a bull roarer is because if you swing it around your head at the right speed and everything, I'm going to get in the back where I'm not going to hit anything. It'll make a roaring kind of a sound. Let's see if I can get it to go. Do you hear that? Okay. Now I know it's not very loud with one person, but imagine if you had 100 people coming running at you with these swinging over their heads. And it sounded like a roar, right? So it's really kind of scary. And then imagine how fast that is and how quick it goes. And then you let it fly, and it goes and it hits your opponent. It could actually cut someone's head off if it were sharp enough. Of course, this one isn't sharp. So if anybody wants to try that, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, we'll let you come up and try it. All right, I'm glad you got a chance to try that. All right, so now let's continue where we left off. And we talked a little bit about the video that we just watched. Not to spoil it or anything, but I don't know how many of you will watch the end of that movie. It's actually a really great story. And what happens after we left off, the 3 girls run off, and they are being tracked by the tracker, one of their own people. And remember that he is only working his job because they have his daughter. And so he wants to be with his daughter. So he's tracking them down, and the oldest of the 3 girls, she has been trained in the way to get through the outback. So she uses all of her skills. And they're following that rabbit-proof fence, and they travel 1,200 miles to get back home. Now, I'm not going to tell you whether they make it or not, but it's about their travels backward to their home. And remember, the sad thing is they know where they're going because they know where they're from. So they could very well travel all this way, and then, here they're sitting there waiting for them. So it's really an incredible story. I was not exposed to it until I had been to Australia and somebody recommended it to me. So I really recommend that you see it. It's a really interesting story and true story. I mean, these kids were put in that situation with the stolen generation. So that's actually going to come up in our history today. So we left off talking about these kids that were put in these schools. So let's take a look at some other history. From 1790 to 1802, one of the leaders of the Aborigine tribe, or one of the heroes of their culture, is a guy named Pemulwuy that you see right here in this picture. And he leads an Aborigine rebellion against the white settlers. And they actually believed he was almost like a god, and he was indestructible because he had been shot 7 times and he was still living. So they thought he was immune to bullets. Well, of course, you can imagine the reports back to the king in England, and they're frustrated because they can't put down this rebel, and they're frustrated. So they said, listen, I want this guy dead or alive. I don't care. There's a reward for you if you can kill him. So eventually, long story short, a Navy man kills him, and they cut off his head and preserved it in a jar and sent it back to England to prove to the king that they had killed Pemulwuy. Well, this story has come up recently in history. In 2010, the Sydney Aborigine have contacted the government of England, and they talked to Prince William. Remember William and Harry, right? Well, they said, we want his head back. We want to give him the correct burial of our tribe and blah, blah, blah. It was very disrespectful. And interestingly, Prince William said that he promised that he would return Pemulwuy's head, which really makes you think, what do they have in their basement? You know, I mean, do they have a bunch of skulls sitting down there from time? I mean, seriously. So he must have thought they had heads sitting around. But then the question is now whether they can find it, because it hasn't been returned as of yet, and they don't know that they can identify it, has been the response. So the Sydney Aborigine are very upset about that, and so it's interesting that that story has come up again. Now, if you look at Australia's history from 1900 on, it is almost like they took a copy of our history. They're like one and the same almost. I will tell you that from 1909 all the way through 1970s, we dealt with this stolen generation thing. These kids were being stolen, not just in the 1930s, but from 1909 through 1970s. And this stuff is going on. The 1910s, they fought in World War I just like we did. They had less than 3 million men, yet 400,000 volunteered to fight in World War I. 60,000 died, and 250 others had casualties. So they took a huge hit in World War I just like we did. In the 1920s, things were great. The economy is booming. They're trading a lot with the United States. And guess what? Our 20s are known as the roaring 20s, right? Because things are great in the U.S. We have a great economy at that point, too. This is like the era of Al Capone and Prohibition and flappers and all that stuff, right? Then, of course, things take a dive in the 30s. What happens in the U.S.? Yep, we have the Great Depression. Well, interestingly, they have the same thing happen in Australia during the 30s. They have a huge economic issue during the 1930s. In the 1940s, World War II sets in, and they are hit just as horribly as anybody else in this war, maybe even worse in some ways. 1942, the Japanese take Singapore, and they take 15,000 Australian prisoners. The Japanese then start bombing the main cities of Australia, in particular Darwin, killed 243 people just in Darwin alone. And so these boys, they go to fight. We called them ANZAC, stands for Australia New Zealand Army Corps, I believe. And they went and they fought in 3 different places. They fought in Europe with us, they fought in the Pacific with us, and they also fought to defend their home because they were getting attacked on their homeland. Women worked in the factories just like we did during World War II. So it was a tough deal for them as well. If you look at their statistics from World War II, They had 990,000 that fought, 27,000 died, 23,000 POWs, most of them in Japanese camps because they were dealing with Japan primarily, 23,000 wounded. And I thought this was kind of interesting. They had 3,000 Aborigines and Islanders who did reconnaissance or spying on the enemy during World War II. If you look at these pictures over here on the right, you'll see this is Sydney Harbor by the coat hanger and the Opera House. And you'll see that the town has been bombed. And then in the picture to the left of that, you'll see that there are boats that are still in Sydney Harbor that were sunk during World War II. If you go and do some scuba diving down there. So let's take a look at Australia's government. As we said before, it is technically a Commonwealth. That's the word we're using, a Commonwealth of Great Britain. So if you look at it, technically the Queen still has the say over pretty much everything, technically. Okay, if you look at the way it's drawn out. If you look on the right here, the voters vote for their Senate that holds 78 seats, and their House of Representatives holds 148. And then, of course, from the bottom, we've got government departments, permanent heads of public service, ministers. But then out of these people that they vote for in the House and the Senate, they then choose their cabinet and their executive council that advises the prime minister. And then you have, of course, the governor general, the prime minister, and the Queen is technically above that, just like Canada would be set up very similar to this too. Interestingly, England does not control the cabinet at all. And actually, overall, they really didn't do a whole lot with the government in the 1900s. And when they did, the Australians got pretty angry about it. In 1942, they passed the Statute of Westminster Act, which basically stopped Britain's parliament from intervening in Australia's government at all. And then I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s, something happened and England fired one of the leading people in the government in Australia. And the Australian people were furious. Because, you know, it's one thing to say, yes, we're a Commonwealth of Britain, and yes, blah, 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 we're a territory. But it's another for them to actually intervene and fire someone of your own. And they were furious about that. So in 1986, they passed the Australia Act that disconnected them completely from British Parliament or courts. And the feeling is that it will be just a matter of time until they get their independence. They are out of respect. From what I've been told and read, they're waiting for the Queen to pass away, and then they will probably try to become an independent country on their own. It's kind of what the people want anyway. So let's look at some major events in history, more modern events. May 26, 1998, we started a day called Sorry Day. And every May 26th, they recognize Sorry Day. And it came out of the Bring Them Home report. This had 800 testimonies of the stolen generation, of children who were stolen from their families. In this document, they reported physical, mental, and sexual abuse while being kept. And so the government steps up for the first time in history. And the Prime Minister, Mr. Rudd, stands up and he says, on behalf of my country, I want to apologize. So we're going to show you that speech. It was a very emotional day for all involved. And so it is still recognized every May 26th. So we'll watch that video now. Isn't that a cool thing? Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. It takes a lot to step up and say, you know what, we really screwed up. You know, in some ways, I think maybe the U.S. could do that a few times too. All right, in early 2000, they had the worst drought in years in Australia. And because it was so dry, on February 7th of 2009, 400 brush fires broke out, if you can imagine that. And it was just a horrible thing for the whole country. 173 people died, 2,000 houses were completely demolished, and 3,500 structures destroyed. And that doesn't even include the forests, the trees, the animals, as you see here, that were killed or damaged. It was just a horrible day for them. They call that day Black Saturday. Well, we can't dismiss Australia without talking about the crocodile hunter. How many of you have seen the crocodile hunter before? Or some of his shows? Yeah, he is something else, isn't he? Well, a major event, September 4th of 2006, Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, dies. How did he die? Doing what he loved best, getting right in the mix of animals that are dangerous. He was out with a stingray that was 8 feet wide, and this stingray struck him several hundred times with his tail spine. And I guess from what I understand, that itself may not have killed him, but it punctured, I think it was his heart or his lungs. And so he actually died from that particular attack. They have mixed feelings about the crocodile hunter in Australia. You know, on one hand, it brought attention to Australia and made people more aware of their country. But on the other hand, Australians don't want everybody to think that they're all idiots like Irwin who are going to get in the face of a snake or any other crazy animal. So they don't want everybody to stereotype them as that kind of a person because they're not all. Of course, it's good for TV. So we'll watch just a little bit of Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter here. Okay, moving on. So have you ever heard the saying, "A dingo ate my baby"? It's a pretty famous slogan, and it actually is kind of a funny but sad story, and it stemmed from a real story. So we talked about dingoes, and I told you, although they may look cute and furry, they can be very dangerous. Well, here's what happened. On August 17th of 1980, a family went camping in Australia, and it turns out that a 2-month-old baby died on this camping trip. Her name was Azaria Chamberlain. Well, the mother claimed, "A dingo ate my baby." Well, I tell you what, everybody thought that was the most crazy thing anybody could ever say. It was on the talk shows and everything, and they were all making fun of her. "Yeah, a dingo ate my baby." How ridiculous is that? Okay. Well, the mother in 1982 was given life sentence because they found the baby's blood in the car. And if the baby were being taken by the dingo and killed, then why would the baby's blood be in the car? So they thought the mother killed the baby. So that's the weird part of the story. But here comes the sad part of the story. 4 years later, they found the baby's clothes in a dingo den. The baby had been there. And not only that, combining that with the evidence that 3 years ago, in that very same place that they had been camping, this family was unloading their car, and their 3-year-old kid was sitting in the backseat of the car. They had the door open, and here they turn around, and this dingo is dragging their 3-year-old out of the car. So it proved, and yes, by the way, they did save the 3-year-old from the dingo and stuff like that. But it proved that, yes, a dingo could have grabbed that baby or even killed it in the car and dragged it away. So the mother was actually acquitted, believe it or not. So it's kind of a very odd story, but now you'll hear that slogan a lot in different jokes and things like that. So that's where that comes from. So I'm sad to say we're going to leave our Australia unit, and the way to say goodbye is hooroo, mate. So let's say it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hooroo, mate. See you later.